Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining. I'm Hernando Vitrago. I'm head of marketing at Privado, and I want to welcome you to this very first session on a three-part series on privacy engineering. This session will be focused on the rise of the privacy engineer, and we're very lucky to have an expert panel moderated by Nishant Bhajaria. You may already all know Nishant. He's a leading expert in the field of data privacy. He's author of the book Data Privacy, a Runbook for privacy engineers. And he's also led technical privacy teams and privacy strategy at companies like Uber, Google, Netflix, and Nike. And quick note on Privado. Privado helps you bridge the gap between privacy and engineering. Our privacy code scanning solution enables your teams to have complete visibility of how sensitive data is collected, used, and shared. It also helps you ensure compliance by providing privacy checks and guardrails in product development. It'll give you the ability to fix existing privacy gaps and prevent new ones. And it'll also help you improve collaboration with engineering teams, giving them rich context and just-in-time guidance delivered within their environments. So with that, I give it up to Nishant to take it away. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Hernando, and hello to Roach, Jay, and Nandita, good friends of mine for a while. Super excited. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hopefully not good night, but I'm so glad that all of us are here this morning. And I'm going to get us kicked off right off the bat. The industry we're talking about, privacy engineering, has gone through dramatic changes, and we've all kind of been at the forefront of it. So I want to hear from my colleagues on the panel about what it means for them to be a privacy engineer. How much of it is privacy, how much of it is engineering, but basically take it away. Would love for you to share your perspective. Roach, you want to go first?
Sure, I would be delighted to kick it off. And I want to start by saying thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Privacy engineer, such an overloaded term, means so many different things in different contexts. For most of my time in privacy, it's been really directly related to software engineering, like building privacy platforms. So in that respect, I would say maybe heavier on the engineering side with a deep love and care for privacy. I've definitely seen a lot of software engineers with no privacy experience at all come into being a software engineer for privacy and totally slay, as you might say. Yeah, but right now I'm working with a team which is not software engineers, maybe former software engineers, more security engineers, and they're also definitely doing the privacy work. So I think it can mean quite a few things.
Thank you, Roach. That was great. And I love the fact that you mentioned that there are people who could be doing coding right now, or people who could have been doing coding until recently and using those skills to address privacy challenges. That's a great perspective. Jay, you want to go next?
Sure. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what is a privacy engineer, because you see people calling themselves privacy engineers doing all kinds of different things. And, I've written about it, had debates with folks about it, what exactly is a privacy engineer. I know Nandita actually worked with a group from the IAPP to come up with a definition. And I think they did a decent job of it. It was hard for them to put exactly in words what a privacy engineer was, but they listed a bunch of domains that privacy engineers work in. And, for example, Roche and I both worked at Twitter in privacy engineering, but we weren't on the same team. We were doing sort of completely different things. Roche was working more on doing privacy software development. I was working more on working with our engineering teams, helping them do technical privacy reviews and ensuring that proper privacy controls were in place, or if they needed help with anonymization or de-identification, providing them guidance around that. So yeah, I think you can do anything from privacy by design work, helping build out a privacy program, which is, I think, a privacy engineering function, to what as Roche did, basically being a software engineer with a heavy focus on privacy, to being a privacy technical expert, working with engineering teams, but not actually doing coding itself. So, I think it's broad, and I think that there's room for a lot of people under this umbrella.
Thank you, Jay. That was great. Nandita, over to you.
Yeah, I think similar to what Jay said, the definition that Jay was talking about, IAPP, Privacy Engineering Board, developed a definition for privacy engineering. That was just our view of how broad the field is. So I'm paraphrasing here, we said privacy engineering is the systematic application or inclusion of privacy requirements into the design, development, and operations of systems. So I've been more focused on the design and operations part, not much on the development. I think that's what Roche, the software engineering part, comes in. But since my background was more on security engineering, so been primarily involved in the privacy by design aspects, technical reviews, architecture code reviews, to make sure that privacy is incorporated. We do appropriate threat modeling.
That is a great perspective, and I hope people in the audience look at this and understand that there are many ways to get into this profession. We have a talent shortage, but what we sometimes don't do well is explain how accessible this can be. We do not want privacy engineering to seem so eclectic, so specialized that nobody can come in. Our job on this panel is to get more people excited to come in and help us address these problems. So we want to be as inclusive as possible. So these examples are instructive for that reason. Let's pivot a little bit and say, for all of us, there was a moment when the organization pivoted, when there was something that happened in the company that made us realize that there is no grand, wizard behind the curtain that'll address these problems, and it's upon us to sort of take the leadership role. For me, it was at WebMD when I realized that customers were sending us spreadsheets with PII without any kind of privacy protection, and I started writing micros to strip out PII. That became sort of a defining moment and taught me how you can address problems and also rise up in the organization. So I would love to hear from my panelists on what organizational dynamics come to mind for them that brought them to where they are at right now. So let me go back in the same order. Roach, you first.
Yeah, I would say when I first got into privacy, it was pre-GDPR launch date. And that was the primary driver of the privacy work that my team was doing. It was regulatory. And I think, as much as the regulations that we're dealing with can seem confusing or heavy or arduous or conflicting, that happens all the time. That is a huge motivator for companies to put their money where their mouth is and actually get some privacy done. My favorite analogy when I'm talking about privacy to lay people or non-privacy people is it's kind of like pollution, right? Like we spent decades, years, hundreds of years not really thinking about what was going to happen to all our trash, and now it's everywhere and we want to get it out of the ocean. That's kind of what's happened with data, right? Companies were collecting data, using it for good reasons and bad reasons, and it's all over their sort of engineering environment. And now with these regulations and some more privacy aware users, we're having to go and find it. We're having to clean it up, compost, recycle, put it in the landfill, whatever, ship it off to the moon, whatever people are going to do with their pollution. And it's a huge job, right? It's going to take many lifetimes.
That is great to hear. And I want to take a little bit of a personal detour. Roach is a good friend of mine. We have been together on the same team before. And I remember there was a specific issue that our team got hit with. And Roach used her tremendous experience across the organization and also in the arts to really come up with a message that made sense to people who didn't understand privacy, didn't understand engineering, but were extremely concerned about privacy engineering. So she managed to address the problem, but also message in a certain way. So that was, I just had to brag on behalf of Roach, but she's a friend of mine and she's too humble to brag for herself. So same question over to you, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, like Roach said, I think it was GDPR certainly began the creation of privacy engineering as we know it. I mean, there was things out there, and actually I was functioning as an attorney pre-GDPR. And when I saw GDPR happen, I had a software engineering background, and that actually is what led me to think, hey, look, there wasn't really an opportunity for privacy technologists. And then I was like, okay, I wasn't really happy being an attorney. I was like, this is an opportunity where I can actually use my technology background, not blow, the money I invested in legal training and learning all I did about privacy. And really, that was where my passion was. And then, so companies actually were able to start investing money and looking at technology solutions. And as all the companies I worked for, I mean, the main thing that they were looking at is, hey, we have so much data that we've collected over the years, and really privacy was just an afterthought because especially companies with a US focus until CCPA came out, they just didn't have to be that concerned about what they were taking in, long as they were getting consent. But even if they weren't getting consent, FTC wasn't coming out making a lot of huge enforcement actions. So there just wasn't a lot of money invested in it. And so once regulations started coming down and saying, look, here's some teeth to this, then companies started saying, okay, privacy is probably something that we should be concerned about, not just from a feels right perspective, but hey, we don't want to be hit with these massive regulations and fines. So I think now it's shifted more to not just a regulations, but at least from my perspective, I don't look at just what regulations call for. I look at how can we make the user experience better. But I think at the start, it was definitely the regulations that drove companies to actually think about privacy engineers.
Thank you, Jane. And over to you.
Similar. I was interested in privacy engineering and sort of was exposed to it because I studied in Carnegie Mellon. There was like a lot of research happening in Professor Laurie Kriener's lab. But I didn't think of privacy engineering as a career at that time. This was pre-GDPR. There were no jobs that looked for privacy skills from technical people. But a similar GDPR was sort of the inflection point where I was in consulting, so there was a lot of work related to data governance and data minimization, which led me to use some of my data and security engineering skills in more privacy related applications.
That was great. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is look at the Q&As and start making up questions as we go along. So there's a question from Jival Preet that says, what would the journey be for a privacy professional with a non-tech background to dive into privacy engineering? Another question from somebody who's anonymous is, and I think in reference to me, I talked about a talent shortage, but at the same time, companies aren't willing to hire entry-level or inexperienced professionals. I love it when there's a job description that says entry-level, and then you have all these qualifications that assume that you've spent a decade in this industry. And I think all of us in the tech industry, and not just privacy engineering, we do a terrible job of pointing job descriptions. And it's always after the fact that we realize, oh my goodness. And what happens is because we have been in this field for a long time, we assume that there is a certain vocabulary that everybody speaks. So I would love to sort of start with my own example and then talk to the three of you as well. So as I mentioned before, if you don't have a definitive tech background, that does not mean that the door is closed. A lot of people assume that you have to write code to build privacy or security engineering tools. But like Roach and I know, we have a common friend from our Uber days where this person had spent a time at Uber. They had written not code per se, but they had dealt with public safety, physical security. So they knew what patterns and anti-patterns to watch for. And they brought that understanding with them. And also they knew Uber more than I did at the time. So they became part of my team. So they brought a very company-focused political perspective, which enabled me to sort of drive the program in the direction I wanted to. So I would say don't shortchange yourself, but at the same time, ask yourself, what problem are you looking to solve for your own career, for your company, and work backwards from there in building skills. Find mentors and try multiple things. And the other thing I would say is the fact that you are attending this webinar means that you care. Conveying that leader mentality in your company will help you as well. But I also feel part of the reason why we are doing this panel is to open the door and say, we are available as resources, as guides to help you understand what you need to do. It's important for those of us in this profession to give a helping hand to folks that want to get in for two reasons. First is to create the talent density. The pipeline ain't going to build itself. But second, we need to make sure that the field has more perspectives than just those of us that have been in it for a decade. So that's my perspective. But I would love to throw open this combined question to my fellow panelists as well. Rosh, you want to go first?
I'm happy to go first. While most of my time, as I've said, in privacy has been really focused on software engineering, I've definitely worked with a lot of incredibly talented privacy engineers who don't have software engineering backgrounds. And one thing I think about a lot with respect to privacy as it exists in an organization is basically like, it is my job to care about what everybody else is doing with their data. Every single team that I work with uses data, and it is my job or my team's job to like privacy all of that. And what that means to me in this context is that there's a huge getting shit done aspect to this job. It might be like a program management role or a TPM role or a product management role. None of that requires previous either engineering or privacy background. You just have to be able to like be really organized and move things along. And so if you're a person who doesn't have a, deeply technical background or a CS background, doesn't ever want to deal with that, that might be a really interesting way in. I think my other panelists probably have more experience from the security engineering and legal side, so I won't say anything that's not true, and I'll defer to them.
Thank you, Roj. Jay, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, so I can talk about that because I sort of made that transition myself. First place, and I've actually had this question asked to me many times. First place, I really always recommend our esteemed host's book as a place to, if you want to know what a privacy engineer does, his book, Runbook on privacy, is a good starting point, and to see one, okay, do I really want to be a privacy engineer in the first place? As Roj just pointed out, there are many ways you can work in privacy without actually getting all the hard technical skills you probably need as a privacy engineer. You can be a program manager and just be really good and organized and have a passion for privacy and good at keeping all the parts moving. But if you really have that passion for embracing the engineering aspect of it, I think his book is a great place to start and getting the foundations of what you need to be looking at. But then you need to figure out a way of somehow getting some kind of a tangent, some kind of experience. Maybe your current role doesn't focus on privacy, but you have a privacy team. See if you can say, look, hey, I'm really interested in privacy engineering. Is there any way I can get a foothold in something what you're doing, and then show your passion for that? I think that helps. But really, I think if you want to, for me, I think system design and privacy by design is probably the best way of getting yourself, if you don't have that strong technical background, in as a privacy engineer, because knowing exactly how to build a privacy program is definitely a part of engineering, privacy engineering. That's more of being able to conceptualize, okay, what do you need from a privacy program perspective, and how do you build it out? And so that's also can manage that. So, those are some thoughts. But yeah, kick it off to someone else.
Thank you, Jen. Nandita?
Like we mentioned, like the privacy engineering field is pretty broad. The definition is pretty broad. So there are varying levels of technical skills required for privacy engineering roles. I would highly encourage people to read job descriptions, even though they're like not well written. I've been doing a side project on analyzing privacy engineering job descriptions, about like 500 of them. And not a lot of them talk about any coding skills. They're focusing on like the basics, like cross-functional collaboration, bias for action that Roj mentioned, having like a curious mind. So they're not even indexing on having deep privacy skills. So I would certainly say that depending on the role, depending on what the expectations are, definitely reach out and apply. You may be a fit, even if you don't have a very deeply technical background. To the second question on how do you get experienced if you have never done privacy before, and all of the jobs are asking for 5 years or 6 years of privacy experience, to Jay's point, like maybe doing a 20% rotation with the privacy team, finding adjacent roles, which are like TPMs or security teams that are working on privacy projects and volunteering to be part of those. That's a good way to get experience within the organization. If you're looking to get experience outside the organization, or the opportunities aren't there in your organization, I would highly encourage you to start volunteering for open source projects. They have all sorts of roles, not just the coding related ones. There are the product roles, there are design roles, and there are roles where you're focusing on more like requirements gathering or like testing analysis. So try to get involved in those. There are also a lot of think tanks and associations. IAPP is one where there's a number of projects to get involved in, or connect with people in the field, and they'll be happy to connect you with like volunteer opportunities where you can get some experience.
I have to add something to what Nandita said. One thing I have never done a single time in my entire life as a privacy person is say no when somebody wanted to get involved. Somebody's like, oh, I want to do a 20% project with privacy. Say no, absolutely not. There's so much to do. There's so much to do that I'm like, yes, please, and bring all your friends. So, across, organizational boundaries, if there's a privacy crew, reach out. I bet they're going to be just as desperate for your help as I would be.
I can one
yeah.
example. We actually started a rotational privacy program at Doordash, which is open to everyone in support orgs, because support teams read all the privacy questions. They are very well aware of like what are the top concerns, what are people writing in. So this is the second year of the program, and it's been very successful in the first cohort.
I think it is nice to hear that companies are being a little more formal about this too and making it available. So, Jay, are you saying something, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, lots of organizations have privacy champions, or in Twitter, we call them doves. God knows what Elon's calling them these days. But, I think that is not an option. And also, I just forgot to mention on the experience part. I mean, privacy engineering is so new that no one has 10 years of experience, or I mean, there are a few people that may have 10 years of experience, but really
it's
GDPR
just Nishant. Only Nishant has 10 years of experience.
Yeah, that's right. Don't be intimidated by that. And it's such a new field that, like at Twitter, I was the job description is a privacy engineer, but they hadn't even created that role in the HR system yet. So don't be afraid if you don't have the experience. Have some experience and have passion, and I'll get you where you want to go.
And let me jump on off an analogy. So I think of companies as being like circuses. Everybody's doing whatever they feel like. And then somebody says, oh my goodness, we got to get some control on our data. So when people ask me what exactly it is that I do at whatever company I'm working with at that moment, I tell them that I usually grab a shovel and chase the elephants, cleaning up stuff off the floor. That's what working in privacy engineering is like. But I also recognize, if you look at the three answers you heard so far, there's a ton of diverse perspectives. So part of our goal behind this webinar, this is first in a series of 3, is to build a community. So far we've seen that privacy engineering, or the conversation on privacy, for the better part of the last decade was driven as if it's a policy and legal issue only. In fact, when I was in my first promotion meeting at Uber back in the day, the Eng community that was on the panel was surprised that the people who reported into me were privacy engineers, and that they could write code, that influenced other people writing code, they wrote tools, but they did it all from a technical perspective. So I feel like the mythology around engineering itself and privacy on top of it has made these jobs and this profession seem inaccessible, which is wrong. So our goal here is to build a community where you connect with us at Privado on an ongoing basis. Our job is going to maybe give you some passion projects or give you something to look at in the industry conversation, and also bring you and demystify this chat a little bit. So I'm seeing a lot of questions on the Q&A about how do we get this job? How do we transition from a non-tech to a tech privacy job? This is that space. You're not going to be able to do this necessarily at a big conference when the focus is to go from one event to the next. But this panel, our lived experiences, our own gaps, is basically an open door for you to do more with this profession. So with that, I'll take the next question. How would somebody make the transition from privacy analyst to privacy engineer? This is from Simone Johnson. I'll pass it to Roche in a second, but I would basically say job descriptions are horrible when it comes to this field. So I would, when you were to make this transition, Simone, I would reach out to the hiring manager or somebody in the team and ask, what problems are you looking to solve? What are the known gaps and what are the unknown gaps? And bring to them your perspective as a key member of the organization. So you have the organizational perspective, you understand where the mistakes are being made, you know exactly what your pain points are. Bring your understanding to the process and shape the role. You may not find a role in that conversation itself necessarily, but you will begin sort of that relationship from a place of genuine inquiry, and that'll help you get in the profession much faster. Because as a hiring manager, to Roche's point, I always have more problems than answers. So if you come to the table with the desire to help me bring your perspective, that is a great place to start. Don't let the job description or the job title dissuade you at all. But Roche, we'd love to hear your perspective.
Is it okay if I actually take my Uno reverse card and send it over to Nandita first?
Absolutely. Nandita, over to you.
Sure. I think, Nishant, to your point, just because the job description, the title says privacy engineer, it may not be a heavily technical role. So I would ask people not to self-eliminate and not apply. It's always good to reach out and find out more about what are the expectations. I have not seen a lot of job descriptions that are very technical. So I would encourage you to like dig a little bit deeper. And there are roles out there which are called privacy engineers, and you may be doing the same thing as an analyst. So it depends on the organization. I've seen organizations where nobody's called a privacy engineer, and similar. It's the case in Doordash because we report to a legal org, and so we can't really call ourselves privacy engineers. So everybody has various titles, but we're doing the same thing.
Same thing in Microsoft. I mean, my technical title is privacy product manager. And if you asked me to write a product roadmap, you'd be in bad shape. So there are no privacy engineers as I define them, or as Microsoft doesn't have that job title. It really, you can't, privacy job titles are just bad in general. So you really have to look at the job description itself and see what it's doing. And you may be an analyst at one company, but you'd be a privacy engineer at another. So yeah, don't eliminate it yourself from a job just because it has the word engineer in it, because you don't know what privacy engineering means to that company.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And by
I
the way,
guess the one thing I would want to add to this is also like engineering is like not something you come out of the womb learning to do, right? Like you like writing code. You don't know if you like writing code, find out. Maybe you can get some of those software engineering skills and start to work, hands on the ground building privacy systems. It's we talk about the CS degrees, engineering background. You don't even self-select out of gaining those skills if it is something that you enjoy. I wouldn't recommend learning it if you don't enjoy it, because you're going to spend a lot of time every day doing things you hate. But if you take a taste and you find that it's a delicious dish, there's a lot of resources, boot camps, online degrees, online courses, part-time courses, part-time degrees, why not try it out?
Yeah. And to Roach's point, I would say there is an organization perspective that is missing in a lot of these roles. And I think what privacy engineering could really benefit from is a little more empathy. So if you come at it through the lens of, I work in this particular team in the business that is fast growing and we're making a bunch of decisions that may have consequences beyond this year or the next, that's the kind of perspective that gets me interested, because then I have an incentive to make sure you get trained. So giving essentially a full view of your understanding of the organization and bring something to the table that the privacy eng community in your company doesn't have is an excellent place to start. On that perspective, I want to move to a question, and we may not get through every single question, so that's a good problem to have, but let me speed things up a little bit. Connor Selleck has asked a question that is, how can privacy engineers craft messaging and privacy culture to help the company move at velocity without hurting productivity? So I'm going to give you an example and then pass it on to Roach, and we'll see who she wants to pass it on to at that point. I would basically identify who in your company is suffering the most because of bad privacy practices. So at Netflix, one example we had when we were collecting IP addresses pre-consent. That was a very understandable use case at the time, because we had to make sure that the app launched quickly on smart TVs so as to keep the user engaged. What that meant is until they signed in, we were collecting IP addresses, device IDs without consent, which at the time was totally fine. Over time, though, those IP addresses were being used for other purposes, and it became very hard for us to recognize which IP was pre-consent and which was post-consent. And that created a ton of work for the platform team who didn't really know much about privacy. So when we went with the resource ask, I had the platform team make the ask on my behalf. And they said the ask is critical for them to keep things running without disruption to the service. So you want to find a way to identify allies in the company who are suffering from the same bad practices you are. So if something is a privacy issue, there's a good chance it's also going to be affecting somebody else in the business. So don't make it all about privacy. It's okay to talk about first principles and the morality of privacy as a human right, but you have to make your case relevant to the business and cultivate friendships within the business. You bring that kind of a relationship to me, I will make sure you get a seat at the table. So that's my 2 cents. But Roach, or do you want to pass it to Nandita or someone else?
Completely agree with everything Nishant said, and I'll just make it very tangible. I started a new role in March, and I've done almost 70 intro chats in the last 4 months. Like my number one tactic, and I know this doesn't scale, but this is what's worked, is go make friends. go make friends. Every time I see somebody's face twice, I pop 30 minutes on the calendar and I ask them, how can I help? What's troubling you? What does your team care about? And now I have friends and we work together and they come to me when they have privacy problems.
That's great. Thank you. And Roche is extremely approachable. I will vouch for that. She helped me out a lot in my early days at Uber. So everything she said, a major plus point too. Jay, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what Roche said. I mean, I think I think the problem teams see is privacy as a roadblock. I want to push out this feature. Privacy is causing me problems because they want all these controls. Well, yeah, you've got to make friends and say, look, I mean, I love innovation as much as whoever's trying to push this feature out, and I want this feature out because ultimately, if we're not getting this feature out, then it's bad for our users because we're not moving forward with that direction. So you have to show you're on the same team, and I think that's how you show which companies that have really excelled in privacy have showed that privacy can be a value add. Look, let's get this feature out, but let's show all the cool privacy features that are also embedded in this feature. So it'll be just delight the user when they're using it. So I think that's it, is making friends, as Roche said, and then also show how privacy is actually a value addition instead of just being some kind of check the box or just roadblock to innovation.
Thank you, Jay. Nandita, over to you.
I feel like everything, all of my data points are already covered. Maybe I'll just recap it. But the teams that are most impacted by privacy compliance, like product, data, security, they're tired of being told no all the time by legal teams. So if you can unblock them, those are really natural allies. Security cares a lot about privacy. They're like similar goals. Their OKRs are the same. So that's a good place to start making friends. Product teams and also data teams, they also care about data minimization. They want to have the data utility. And I was surprised to see that a lot of privacy, like a lot of software engineers care very deeply about privacy, even though it has nothing to do with their OKRs. They would just want to do the right thing. So also another group of natural allies.
And that is such a great segue. And Nandita, I'm going to come to you first for the next question to make sure that you get first tips. There's a question from anonymous attendee. I'm going to paraphrase it. How do you make sure that we build for privacy as a human right and not just as a bare minimum compliance requirement? So I think Microsoft has done an excellent job. So I remember at IAPP a few years ago, they debuted their compliance dashboard where the cloud team was making the argument that here are the things we're doing in terms of access management, in terms of data cleansing, that are critical for us to maintain workload capacity and also reduce bills for our customers. And data minimization, which is a privacy right, could also dovetail along that. So if you are getting a better handle on your data so as to make sure that you have better customer experiences, that guess what, you're helping privacy as well. So you want to identify causes, not just people in the company, where achieving that solution is going to be critical from a privacy perspective as well. So that would be one example. And Microsoft has made a pretty good name for themselves when it comes to being the cloud that's enterprise focused, that's compliance focused, and that also enables protection of user rights. So look for those teams, look for those causes. That's another way to think about this. Nandita, I'll go to you first to see if you have an example you want to share.
Similar aspects, like similar thoughts here. I think that compliance is inherently reactive and it is the bare minimum. Unfortunately, most companies are indexing just on compliance, but solving for privacy and being proactive and like respecting users, building products that respect users, actually future-proofs products that you're building against evolving requirements from regulators and just meeting customer expectations. If you do a good job at threat modeling and identify everything that can go wrong, irrespective of what does like checking the box on compliance, I think you will by default address societal norms, culture, like expectations, and just like set a higher bar for yourselves and the products that you're building.
Jay, over to you next.
Yeah, thanks for all your praise for Microsoft, by the way. But I will say that from a privacy perspective, maturity-wise, it's been focusing on privacy for a long while, and with that, I would say that not much of my job is actually I mean, there's a compliance aspect of it for sure, but I'm not really looking at things through a GDPR or CCPA lens. I'm looking at it more of a, how is this going to impact the user, and what should we do to make sure that our user has a good experience with this? And so it was more like putting myself in the place of a user instead of, obviously I've got to take GDPR and thinking about where this is going to be used geographically and all of that. That is definitely an aspect of my job, but certainly I'm empowered to look at things from a user perspective and definitely try to make sure that those controls are put in place and that so our users have the best experience.
Roche, over to you.
Yeah, I'm actually going to provide a slightly different perspective. Like I, as a person, care about privacy as a fundamental human right, but like, hello, welcome to capitalism. Like all of these companies, like their primary directive is to make money. And if I understand correctly, like if they don't make as much money as they possibly can, that is illegal, right? So I don't think like privacy as a human right is actually like a very compelling narrative to businesses, unfortunately. It's about like cash on the table, and that's what they exist to do. Like let's dismantle capitalism so we don't have to do this anymore. But that's a big job. Mostly we're just going to try to make privacy a little bit better. I did see the question in the chat, and there's a second half to the question that I also wanted to speak to, which are what are resources to help people care more about privacy? I've actually found fiction to be really delightful here. There's a lot of really good like speculative fiction and science fiction that talks about privacy. And actually at Uber, we did a little privacy book club. And one of the books that we read, I think it was called Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. Great book about privacy. The Circle, some works by Kurt Vonnegut. Just Google like fiction about privacy. These are the things that like your coworkers might like read in a weekend, and I think it gives a really deep felt sense of why privacy is important.
That is great. Thank you, Roach. And I'm going to look at the next couple of questions as well. It's from Anonymous. Basically, what is there a responsibility for companies to help provide support for the privacy of its people? I would basically combine that with the question we've talked about so far. I would basically say that there is no prescriptive law in place like GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, or even the ISO standard. They don't come and say your engineer should do X, Y, Z. Remember when Target was breached in 2014, they were PCI compliant. Of course, the PCI organization withdrew retroactively that certification once they got breached, which is for all the good regulations will do for you, right? So the goal would be, and there's an Uber example here where Roach and I were part of a team where we work with a legal team to come up with an internal abstraction, and we call it the customer data retention data handling requirements document, where we basically said, here's how you classify data, here's how we come up with tags, and here's what the policy attendant that means. And initially that was a legal and privacy engineering document. Over time, it grew to become security engineering. Now platform also co-owns it. So you want to come up with an internal abstraction that gives you the best possible meeting point between your actual regulatory commitments, as well as things you have to do to make the user more successful. So the recently released Privacy Center tool by Uber, this was on when I ran the team back in the day, was basically a combination of backend features we had built for compliance purposes. And then when we felt reasonably safe that they work correctly, we put a nice UI on it and made it available to our customers. That was one of the few times where a Silicon Valley area company got good publicity for privacy. It doesn't happen every single day. So look for opportunities where your backend compliance work can be surfaced to the user and give them a sense of exactly what you have done, because it will be important for you to showcase that investment as well for your customers and your shareholders as well, like Rose correctly pointed out. Anything to add, folks, before I move to the next question? Roach, Nandita, Jay? Okay, so I'm going to move to a question from Vaishali. How do people in tech advance and develop their understanding of privacy? So Roach gave an example. Are there any specific certifications that could be helpful? I'll go to Jay first this time, and then Nandita, and then Roach. Jay first.
I mean, there's certifications out there. Certainly the IAPP has CIPT, which I think could help. I like Data Protocols, privacy engineering certification. I mean, there's things out there, but I think it's more, just building that practice, building a privacy culture where software engineers understand. I mean, engineers come to me with all kinds of questions that really aren't privacy related, but they're so focused on privacy that they're thinking through these things before I can even think through it myself. So I think if you built that culture and have shifted privacy early on in the development life cycle, then you know, it's naturally going to flow that way.
Nandita, over to you.
I mean, if you're trying to learn about privacy and specifically privacy engineering, and you're somebody who likes a structured program, who wants to take a test at the end, I would say certifications are not bad place to start. Carnegie Mellon has a privacy engineering certificate program. Data Protocol has a self-paced certification program. ISACA and IPP both have their technical privacy certification. So if you're not interested in reading several books and like learning it through osmosis or some, like if you prefer a more like short-term study mode and get a certification out of it, especially if your company like reimburses such programs, I would say that there are certifications out there, but with the caveat that job descriptions or like hiring managers are not looking for those certifications. You will not get a job based on that certification.
I love that. Necessary but not sufficient. And thank you so much. There's a question from Eduardo, and I'm going to throw it right back to Nandita since you were talking anyways. The question is, what are your top 2 ways privacy engineers can become involved early in the design processes? So in other words, how do we make sure that privacy engineering is not just an after the fact checkbox? How do you get yourself further up the stack? Ideas, Nandita?
Oh, sorry. Am I starting?
Yeah, I'll let you go first and then go to Jay.
I think a lot of it is unfortunately like not in your control as a privacy engineer on when you get involved. It is culturally like in the organization, if privacy is included in the PRD process, like right in the ideation process, if that's not the norm and if you're trying to change culture, I think it's going to be difficult to do that without any like top-down support. So if that's already the case, great. But if that's not the case, then I think this is a long journey ahead of you of like gaining consensus and getting some top-down buy-in to get there. But there is no shortcut. I can't think of an easy way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just what Nandita said. I mean, like I don't have to do anything because the process is there at Microsoft. They know they have to get approval from privacy if personal data is involved, and they have to come to me. So it's easy. At Twitter, they were trying to put a process in place, but engineers figured out ways around that process fairly easily. So, I mean, you've got to, I think is what we've said previously, show the value add to the organization for privacy, build the relationships with the engineering teams and show how privacy can add value. And so hopefully you can build that culture of privacy value add.
Thank you. Roach?
Yeah, make friends. Make friends while you're waiting for the organization's change. Show that you can be useful.
Thank you, Rosh. So I'll just give you another example, folks. Identify who in your company is getting hurt because of suboptimal privacy. And there's a good chance it's your friends in the legal team. They have to do what is known as a PIA or a DPIA, and that typically happens once all the critical edge decisions have already been made. So the legal team has to make some really tough choices. Either they block something at the last minute and piss everybody off, or they have to redesign everything, or take the risk that nothing bad will happen. Those are all really bad choices. It's like getting punched in the eye or kicked in the chest, right? So what you want to do is position yourself as, this is what Roach and I did at Uber back in the day, where we said, we're going to go upstream and talk to our fellow engineers across the company and identify design decisions they're making that could blow up in our faces. That gives us 2 things. First is we can influence them at that early stage and give them some solutions in mind that are technical in nature, and also alert the legal team so that they can prioritize that DPIA rather than waiting for it to get to them. So there are ways in which you can be the connecting tissue across the organization. That's just one example. So find out who's hurting before they tell you and help them fix their problem. That'll help you make friends without feeling pressured by a top-down mandate, which will come hopefully once you notch up enough wins in the belt. So before I move to the next question, there's a bit of a call to action. Hernando from Toronto is going to be posting a form that will help you join this community where we can invite you for future webinars. You could be on the panel the next time and I would get the chance to learn from you. But please look for that link coming up in the next few seconds, and please fill out your information. We'd love to keep the conversation going just even after this webinar is done. On that note, moving to the next question, and I'm going to have Roach answer it first. I'm currently a security project manager. Is it necessary to pivot to privacy analyst roles before becoming a privacy engineer? Roach, take it away.
Nope. I haven't talked to two people in the privacy engineering field who have had the same path to privacy engineering. Everybody comes from a different place. My hot take is get a job as a privacy engineer. Apply to jobs as privacy engineers until you get one, and then that'll be your new job.
And over to you.
Yeah, I did transition from security to privacy, and a lot of the skills are transferable. I mean, it's just like sometimes it's just like a terminology thing, like what you call reducing the attack surface is data minimization. What you call geofencing or like export controls is data localization in privacy. So a lot of what you do is going to be applicable, and I would try to like build your story around it so that you can do a better job in interviews and explain how your skills, how you have relevant experience and how it can be applied to privacy.
Jay, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I mean, from a different perspective, I didn't know a whole lot about security till I started becoming a privacy engineer, and I don't know that I can necessarily just walk in and be a security engineer, but I know a whole lot more now than I did before, just because so much of it is analogous. I think, and as exactly as Roche said, nobody's path to privacy engineer is a straight line. It's always crooked and dances around. So definitely just sell your story.
Definitely. And I'm going to take the next question, and I'm going to have Roach jump on it first because it's a very tricky question. Privacy, and this is from Anonymous. Privacy engineering is an emerging field. Why is the US leading this? Europe, even with GDPR, doesn't have a lot of privacy engineering jobs. Roach, please, I can see you smacking this question out of the park. Please take it away, and then Nandita and then Jay after that, Roach.
I wish I had a very well-reasoned response here. My hot take would be a couple of things. God, I could be totally off base, but like all these big tech companies are here in Silicon Valley. So, you've got these big companies with a lot of data, enough money to pay some privacy engineers, enough skin in the game that they need to do privacy a little bit better because they don't want to have to close down their operations in Europe, and, big motivation for privacy engineering to come here. But gosh, somebody else, please dig me out of the hole I just dug if I'm missing something.
No, I think you got it. I mean, we do have some folks in Europe working on that, but it is largely focused in the US. But also, I think it just might be a terminology thing. I think, I don't know. Some guy from posted on LinkedIn and was asking what exactly was privacy engineering and how could that be considered an actual scientific thing, and had his whole process about it, and it may just be because I tried to educate him as best I could how I do think privacy engineering is actually an engineering discipline, but since they aren't seeing it over there, there's no roles over there, it's just maybe something that, but I think Roger's point is apt. I mean, the biggest technology companies in the world, other than a few outliers like Spotify and some others out there, are all based here in the US. So, a lot of the jobs start here in the US and then kind of find their way overseas.
Yeah, I think Europe in general, I guess like societal expectations of privacy are kind of higher. So I'm guessing that they have not done the big goof ups that US has done when it comes to privacy. So we've done a bad job, and therefore we have more privacy engineers to fix it. The second point is like similar to what Jay mentioned. It's a terminology issue because the European counterparts that I work with, they don't call themselves privacy engineers. They're either security engineers or sometimes like trust and safety or some like broader terminology, but they do the same. The work is the same. So I think if you're just like counting the number of job openings for privacy engineer role, that's not a good indication of where the demand is. And I think the third one is it's I believe US is more like individual mindset where people care more and like they don't trust the government as much versus I think like some of the Nordic countries, there is like more collectivist mindset. And this may be a controversial statement, but like, I'm quoting like a Google privacy by design study, which found that people just like are not that concerned about privacy in Europe because they trust the government to do a good job.
That was a great perspective. And it's like, a question could be asked, why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is. And especially on the US West Coast, you notice all of these companies, and I know people that have worked at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and they kind of jump from one company to the other. So there is a very community aspect to it as well. So in a weird way, you have similar problems. We could compete with each other by day. So Roach and I used to work at Uber and at Doordash, but we've kind of gotten to know each other, even though our businesses compete with each other. So there is this aspect of community, even within competition, that is very endemic to the US West Coast. There is nothing analogous to that on the European side. But we want to see a world where people have problems and solutions coming from all over the world rather than just a US specific approach. Because in the US, regulations can often change, like depending on who runs Washington, DC or your state capital, the community tone can change pretty dramatically. So it would be nice to have the Europeans not just offer regulation, but also offer solutions as well. So on that note, there's another question from Stephen Myers, and I know we're getting to the last few minutes here. How have you convinced organizations that privacy is an ongoing investment, technical privacy, and your resources are expensive? So how do you make the case that this is not a one and done deal? Roach, over to you first.
I actually haven't done this. So myself, I have not actually done this exact thing. So maybe I'll pass it over to somebody who has.
Okay, Jay, you want to go next?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
How have you convinced organizations that privacy is an ongoing investment, given that our resources are expensive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be challenging. I mean, I came into a startup company that had IPO'd, but it was still very early in its privacy program development, and they had very limited resources. I was acting as the sole privacy engineer, and they had a lot to do. You have to build out an entire program, analyze all the data flows, and you have to invest in a lot of technology to be able to do that. So you've got to find a champion that's at the C level really to do that. Either be the CISO or perhaps the general counsel, if they can understand the legal risk involved with not complying with CCPA or GDPR or whatever the appropriate regulation is. So I think you got to find a champion high up that actually has the purse strings to be able to spend the money.
Over to you.
I think, yeah, showing the ROI of a privacy engineering program, it can be difficult, but it's doable. And I've done it in my consulting experience as well as my current role. Either you show it in monetary terms of like how is deletion or like storage reclamation saving money, how is redaction or some like obfuscation techniques reducing risk, like access controls are better, security investments would be less. You can also come at it from a compliance risk perspective. Like that's easier for people to understand. Like, do we want to be front page news? Do you want to be like lose trust and be like, would you be okay with a breach at this magnitude? So making those like cases in front of executives helps. What has been the biggest help is if a regulator issues you a consent decree. I think like that's the biggest motivator to get investment in privacy engineering program. I do not recommend going that route, but unfortunately that is the sad reality.
Okay, so we only have the last 4 minutes, 3.5 actually, and I'm going to once again put a plug for the form Hernando has posted in the chat. Please sign up and keep the conversation going, because we're serious about the community aspect of this, and that begins with this webinar right here. But in the interest of time, I'm going to ask my panelists one last question, 45 seconds each. A lot of this conversation has been about getting people started, getting people sort of in the door. Where would you like the conversation to be 1 year from now? So let's assume we all get together the 27th of July, 2024. What do you think the world is like? What would you like to see, Roach? I'll let you go first, 45 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, if we're all getting together to talk about privacy in a year, I think what I do and what I would love to do is just talk about what you've seen, talk about what you've learned, help me not make the same mistakes that you did, and I'll return the favor. Those are the conversations that I love to initiate and find to be really helpful as I, continue down the path of privacy.
Nandita, over to you.
I think next year I would like to talk about like what did we achieve? Are there collectively did we come up with solutions that have worked for us or some lessons learned? There are a few think tanks that I'm working with that are trying to solve this problem with like either building reference architectures for like a privacy stack or like a privacy by design certification program, a standard for privacy engineering. I think those would be some solutions to share next year would be great.
Jay?
I mean, I think AI is totally impacted what I've been looking at from a privacy perspective over the last few months. And so, I mean, I think what people have learned from AI governance and how its impact on privacy, because I think, a lot of the same privacy rules apply to AI and what has worked and what has not, just exactly as what everyone else has said.
Thank you. And one last thing, I'll ask Fernando to post a link for the next webinar. It's in a few weeks. We look forward to the conversation going. We have a couple of minutes. I would love to sort of have people reinforce the fact that we want this conversation to continue. So for those of you on this audience list today, tell your friends about our upcoming webinars. We welcome all new ideas. And I want to put a call to action. If people want to reach out to us on LinkedIn and add us as contacts and keep that conversation going informally, that's helpful as well. But please fill out the form for input, for ideas to keep the conversation going, but also reach out to us as well. I do have one last question from somebody in the audience. What resources would you like to recommend that are available online that we haven't discussed? So I'm not going to put a plug for anything I've done. So I'm going to hand it off to Nandita one last time and see if you have any resources you want to point people to.
I think we talked about it earlier that there are certification programs. There's ISACA and IAPP have certifications. Doordash Protocol has a really good course. There's the privacy engineering book. William Stallings has a really good book on privacy engineering. If you're like starting from basics on what is encryption, I would encourage to read that book. Carnegie Mellon has a privacy engineering certification program. I believe Udemy has a privacy engineering course. There's lots of courses. I've not had experience with all of them, so can't recommend one or the other, but I encourage you to explore.
Anything, Rose? Jay, we have like a total of 45 seconds.
Yeah, I popped a link in the chat to the Usenex Pepper Talks. They're almost all free on YouTube. And there's some really interesting, I would say fairly technical, real world talks about what people are doing in the field.
Jay?
Just to echo everything Nandita and Rose said, they pretty much covered the landscape.
Okay. Thank you all so much. This was great. Look forward to the next one. Appreciate you guys spending an hour of your life with us this morning. Again, thank you all. Have a great rest of the week and a good weekend as well.
Thanks so much for the invite. Great to chat.
Bye-bye.